addresses. Now, the benefits from studying philosophy. I want to just say a couple of words about that. Perhaps now it might be an idea you might want to record, eh? There's the person who comes 60 miles I was just talking about, Mr. Schlee, who has been a supporter of this school and came every night at one time for a long time. However, there are difficulties at the moment. But however, do you want to start recording now? You right? The benefits of studying philosophy. Just a few remarks. Press the red button, the red one. It teaches you how to think correctly. That's the first benefit. It gives you a better sense of values, much needed today. It gives you a better global vision of human knowledge. It allows you to understand the basis of sciences and arts. It gives you the tools for studying every other discipline, especially sacred theology. It gives you the proofs of what are called the preambles to faith. Have we got a soul that survives after death? We'll be proving that. Is there a God? Etc. Or they're called preambles to faith. That's just one thing. Then in science, when I taught in Australia, I'd never taught young people till I came to this continent. I taught people who had MDs, PhDs, that sort of thing. There were scientists, mathematicians, all sorts of people. And they all said the same thing. They progress better in their sciences as a result of studying philosophy. Now, just a couple of words on how to study. At first, philosophy might seem to be, to some, to be a bit strangely different. Well, it is. But you will get familiar with its matter, method, and language. An old saying, iteration and reiteration is the art of learning. In other words, review, review, review. This means read and reread the stuff, but do not stay stuck in some sentence or paragraph or page. Skip it and read ahead if you don't understand it. And sometimes when you read ahead, what you missed before or couldn't understand falls into place. That's an experience many of us had so many times. In other words, read along, going forward, even if you do not understand something. Then, of course, you can always ask me or Dr. Bonnet to explain. Give yourselves a chance. Don't toss the towel in. Don't give up easily. This is a rare chance for you to learn what others are searching for. Remember, you're not dumb. You have not had a chance before to study this. It is worthwhile. It takes a little time, then it starts to dawn on you. And as St. Thomas has said beautifully, and he understood human nature probably better than any other man that ever lived. The relationship between the intellect and the internal senses. We'll be studying all of this. You developed an expertise by practice. The intellect examining the images of the internal senses. It requires practice, practice, practice. And you're getting it by just being in the class and thinking. So without that, after all that, I think I'll retire for a moment. Dr. Bonnet asked me, could he say a couple of words? And most certainly. Would you go ahead?
Thank you, Dr. Waters. I'm just going to give you a brief, I guess, I don't know whether to call it a non-commercial. Because sometimes people forget the value of what you are actually receiving here. I can say it because he's giving the course and not me. But I believe it's the psychoanalysts who say that it's very important to make the patient pay for what he's getting. And Dr. Waters is violating a very basic principle here because he's not making you pay. But having taught in universities for 40 years myself, having been his boss for 10 years, when I was chairman of the department at Niagara, I'm keenly aware that universities and colleges are big business. And as a matter of fact, for a course in philosophical psychology, which we've both taught more times than we can remember, I would, depending upon the overall tuition that's charged, probably the value of the course is perhaps $1,500 to $2,500 or $3,000.
I'd say $3,000.
Yeah, I would say at least up to $3,000. But the point is, What you are getting here is the same course, same professional quality course that you would get in any university, except in some ways it's better. For one thing, you don't have to take any tests. You don't have any quizzes. You don't have any term papers. You don't have any nagging little overnight assignments. But there is another thing that I consider even of greater value, and that is that you are being given the course the way it ought to be given. In most universities today, the impact of historicism is so great, this historical method, that we, at Niagara this was the case, and it is at virtually every other place, we were forced to use a syllabus which entailed many historical aspects that frankly fall under the heading of what is referred to as BS. I mean, if you want to study the history of philosophy, 90% of what you're studying is a history of people's mistakes. And when you give a course where you are forced to give 40, 50, 60% of it historical, you frankly are wasting people's time largely. This is a science, philosophical psychology. If you take a course in chemistry or physics or mathematics, you don't get the history of the discipline, you get the discipline, you get the science, you get an organized body of knowledge. And that is what you are primarily getting in this course. He is distilling to you the scientific content of the course with sufficient historical context to have it make sense and without unduly wasting your time with the errors of others. So this, I would say, is not only equal to the courses you would get in universities generally, it is far superior in terms of quality and content, and of course being taught by a master of the field. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. It is interesting to note that I have received on my email, I'm in touch with people, the Center for Economic and Social Justice in Washington, D.C., and a whole lot of emails going backwards and forwards, and I was invited to do something. We won't go into that, but they spoke about the school here. We're teaching philosophical psychology. And a professor in some university sent an email back and said to Dr. Curlin, who passed it on to me, philosophical psychology, that's an interesting, unusual name. That's the normal name it had for hundreds of years. But the man was so ignorant he didn't know that. It's a very interesting, unusual name he's given the course. When I came to Canada, to the University of Montreal to study from Australia years ago, I heard of a young man who was going to study for a doctorate in Australia. God help him, that's all I can say, studying for a doctorate in philosophy in Australia. And he said he was going to study something and do a doctoral thesis on the philosophy of psychology. It's never been done before. I said, well, you go back and tell him Aristotle did it 24 centuries ago. He called it De Anima, concerning the soul. Anyway, let's get started now tonight. First of all, a few minutes reviewing what we did last week. By the way, if you wanted those notes I just mentioned, I can run that it's on the email. I can send it out to you if you're interested. Please make sure I've got your correct email address. So, last week, if you take your pages and look at page 1 if you want to guide you, we talked about the nature of philosophy. We saw it is a science, but how do we define science? So we saw that, certain knowledge through causes. Then we saw the definition of philosophy. Then we saw the method used in a science is most important. Empirical sciences, which are called sciences of observation, if you like, or sciences of experiment. And as I told you last class, science which is called empirical or experimental, experiment means a sort of an isolated experience. That's what an experiment is, an isolated experience. An experience here and now in front of me, under control, my control. Remember the word experimentum in Latin came through French as experience, and it came directly from the Latin as experiment. So there's two modes of science. One which is experimental, and the other which is philosophical. We're going to have a lot more to say about the philosophical. So we saw that, and I've got some notes there explaining that for you. The philosophical science uses principles of reason. We're going to see them in action as we go along. You'll get used to them. For instance, the whole is greater than its part. That's a principle of reason. Whatever undergoes movement is moved by another. That's a principle of reason. These principles guide the mind to think correctly and accurately. And the philosopher is, above all, a guardian of the principles. And every other science uses or assumes these principles, but does not defend them because it's not their position. You've got the absurd situation of Dr. Bonnet was that again about at the subatomic level the principle of causality doesn't exist. Isn't that right? That's absurd, utterly absurd. Only somebody like an experimental scientist could say such a silly thing. Causality, one billiard ball is the cause of another billiard ball moving. David Hume denied that. We'll see later. He says we can have no knowledge of that. We'll see that later. But at the subatomic level, in atoms and molecules, that doesn't apply. That means the man who said that doesn't understand the meaning of the principle. We defend that all those principles in a part of philosophy called epistemology. We dealt with a little bit of it last semester, some of you might remember. But the principles of reason are so evident, there's nothing easier than they are in order to defend them. When you defend something, you've got to have something basic, more elementary principles or more elementary concepts to defend it. There's nothing more basic than the principle of these principles, rational principles of reason. So I've given you a couple of pages of the principles there, and just read them through and get some ideas of them. Now the reasoning. Let's talk a little about the reasoning. We'll deal with this more later, but I just want to show you the how shall I put it, the basics just for the moment. We have three operations of the human intellect. First is simple apprehension, a simple grasp in reality. Tree, there's the mind's simple grasp. That's what apprehend means, to apprehend something. A monkey's tail is called a prehensile organ, a grasping organ. Well, apprehend comes from two Latin words. Ad and prehendere. Prehendere means to grasp. This is a prehensile organ, our hands. A monkey's tail is a prehensile organ, a grasping organ. Grasping towards. Ad always means going towards something. They changed that to P to make it easier to pronounce. Apprehendere rather than adprehend. It'd be difficult to say. So the first act of the human intellect is simple apprehension, simple grasp. Dog, redness, colour, relationship, shape. They're simple grasps of reality. Second, we put two together in a judgment. The apple is red. The dog is running. Man is tall. That's called a judgment. Then we put two judgments together and we get a reasoning. Every man is mortal. Joe is a man. Therefore, Joe is mortal. That's the reasoning. So first we have to have the ideas. Then secondly, we put them together in judgments. Then thirdly, we put two judgments together to get another new judgment. We'll see all that later. All you need to know for the moment is the philosophical act is a principle of reason put together with another judgment, a fact, and then you come to a conclusion, which equals the cause of the fact. One which has been ridiculed by philosophers. You know, it's a very fond practice philosophers have of setting up a straw man and knocking it down, saying, aren't I brave? Look, I just belted a straw man to the ground. They talk about this one, for instance. Whatever undergoes movement is moved by another. But things are moved. And we arrive at the conclusion, therefore, God is to move it. Well, admittedly, it takes more reasonings than that. And we'll see them in due course. But the philosopher who laughs at that doesn't understand the nature of logic. He'd better to go back 24 centuries and study the greatest founder of logic that ever lived, Aristotle. That's the son of Mr. and Mrs. Stottle. They call him Harry, so he's Harry Stottle. So, sorry about that. Now, I've given you an example there on your page, about page 3, is it? Every man is mortal. But every man is composite. That's why they're mortal. And I've shown you the process. If you look at that there, well, I'll put this on the board. I think some of you haven't got it in front of you, I can see. This is the way the reasoning goes. Every man mortal. No, I'm sorry, I'm going back the wrong way. No, I'm right. What I was trying to do, I forgot I was doing a special illustration. Every man is composite, but every composite is mortal. Therefore, every man is mortal. Composite belongs to every man. Mortal belongs to composite. Therefore, mortal belongs to every man. Here's the principle in logic. If two ideas agree with a third, then they agree with each other. If these two are identical with this, therefore they're identical with that. So that's how the reasoning process goes. I have a special pen here. This is my special pen. I write longhand with this, you see. So it is a pen, believe it or not. I don't write shorthand or longhand with it. I won't be in your way there. So every man is, that's how the reasoning processes go. One of these, not necessarily this one, but one of these in the last analysis must be a principle of reason. The other must be a fact. The conclusion then explains the cause of the fact. Now I've set this out for you in an easy way to follow. I think it's on page 4. My pages are a little out. There's a reason for that. I'm going to have to reprint this stuff, I think. See the arrows going down there. Every man is mortal because he's composite. Every man is composite because he's made of body and soul. Those are things that are made of body and soul because they're living. And living things are automotive, self-moving. Therefore, we conclude man is mortal. Now, I'm just showing you the way the ideas run. That's not a strictly scientific way of doing it, but it gives you the idea. Look at it this way. Here's a fact in front of us. Let's illuminate the fact with principles of reason. Now I can see what it's doing. That's what happens in the mind. The imagination supplies the intellect with its images. And the intellect is looking at this, and it's making little judgments out of it, and it comes finally to a conclusion. But guiding it, the light that lights up the intellect is principles of reason. This law fall into place when we go along. Last class, now that's the method of philosophy. Last class we saw man in general. Man is a unified substance and an operational whole. We saw that. If somebody jumps on my toe and I'm lying in bed all night suffering from a sore toe, it's pretty darn hard to face an exam next day. Boy, didn't my students know that. I had a toothache all night, so I can't do the exam today. Coward. Man is one substance. We know that we think with our whole being. The intellect operates on the images here, so we think the intellect's here. No, the whole soul fills the whole body. We'll see this later. And we think with that. But the whole of us operates as one unified organism. One of my favourite pastimes about 100 years ago when I was a boy was studying rock pools. My dad would be fishing. He could never understand why I didn't want to be fishing when I was examining invertebrates, that sort of thing. And the happiest day of my life was when I studied invertebrate zoology. And I'd study all sorts of things there in rock pools. and you see different, and there's a lot of these along the Australian coast, and you see things like the blue-ringed octopus, which is deadly poison. If you go up north, there's the stonefish, which is even more poisonous. Murders have been committed using the poison of some of these things. But to see these things, you touch one part of it, the whole thing, organism reacts. The mimosa plant, they've got them in the Buffalo Botanical Gardens, in the hothouse there. You touch one part of it and it'll shrivel up its fronds like this, and next thing the arm will drop. And I've seen boys go along going, touching them like this just to make their arms, all the little branches drop. But the whole plant responds. So man is one substance and an operational whole organism. Now, B, those operations are subordinated amongst themselves. That is to say, there's an order of higher operations and lower operations functioning in keeping with that. All ordered under one another. Subordinated. Subordered. The one part is, now for us, for instance, the intellect tells us, I want to do this. Oh, I see that book over there. I want that book, etc., etc. So my legs get going, ordered by my intellect, rather by my will eventually. But so we're a subordinated, coordinated whole organism. That's all clear enough. The mode of operation of a little thing, of a living thing. That's where we left off last week. Let's review that again. Now we're going to get a little bit more into detail and see how the organisation takes place amongst these things. We'll divide the board down here. What happened? Did I pick up the wrong marker? Yes, I did. And we'll divide the board into non-living and living. Now we compare the two to find what they've got in common, and then find out what's proper to the living. The word proper comes, we've got it in English, property. Proprius in Latin means own, what you own. And the word own, by the way, is an old English past participle. It means owed. What I own is owed to me by you. Keep your cotton picking hands off. That's what the word own means. Owed by you to me. So, what we want to find out is what is the own of the living thing. What's properly belonged to it. What its propers are. What its properties are. What belong to it and it alone. So the non-living operates this way. Hot, let's say, coffee. Hot spoon. My old master used to use hot bar of iron always. I don't know why he didn't think of hot coffee. It seems so practical and mundane or something. So the hot coffee, this is the agent, the coffee, and the spoon is the patient. We'll get used to those terms. This is the one that does the act, the active one, and that is to say the coffee, and the spoon is the passive one. The word passive, the word patient, it's all the same word. It means to suffer. So the hot spoon. This is the principle of the action, the hot. So it produces that reaction. But it's always towards another. The action is not towards itself. That's what's characteristic of non-living things. We call it transitive action. Trans means across in Latin. I don't make any excuses for speaking about Latin and Greek and German and French and Italian as we go along, because remember that the English language consists of about 80% of Latin and Greek. Particularly the scientific world is pushing it into Greek now. It in Latin means goes. It goes out. That's where you go out, that exit. So transit goes across. Our Canadian friends here tonight will be familiar with the Trans-Canada Highway. The highway goes right across Canada. I've had the joy of travelling on that several times. So it's always other and other. The Latins have a beautiful expression, aliud et aliud. What does the action, what suffers the action are other and other. The hot coffee heats the spoon. It does not heat itself. But a couple of very poor philosophers thought that matter comes to its own perfection. Can anybody tell me any one of those philosophers? Marx, exactly. Karl Marx. He thought that matter comes to its own perfection. It's one of the greatest contradictions in the history of the world in philosophy. Karl Marx taught that it doesn't require a cause, that matter will come to its own perfection. Yet why did he need the Communist Party? To cause it to come to its own perfection. A great contradiction. There's so many contradictions amongst philosophers, it's unbelievable at times. I've thought of writing a work just on that alone, but it's a waste of time writing about rubbish. So, as Woodbury used to put it, if anybody talked to him about Marxism, he'd say, do you put the kettle on the heat of a morning to make a cup of tea? And he'd say, yes, I do. Well, you're being very contradictory by doing that. Now, the living. On the other hand, the living, say, we'll take a horse. What kind of horse do we take, Jenna? Any particular one you like? Yeah, that's right. So, the horse does for itself everything it does. It takes hay and makes horse out of it. More horse. So, it's got a lot of horse sense in doing that. So, it's the agent and the patient. And we call this immanent action. Immanent. Not eminent or not imminent. Remember, I distinguished those three last week. So what it does, it remains within the horse. The action, the effect of the action is within the horse. So that's the difference, the basic difference. Look, when you eat food, you're eating it for yourself, not for somebody else. When you're thinking, your intellect is doing the act, your intellect is benefiting from the act. We'll see that that's a special kind of immanence, even more immanent. When you're imagining things, we can go through transitive actions too. Give somebody a push, or a tree falls and bumps into you or something like that, or a runaway horse or a dog. They'll cause a transitive action. So we undergo, but what we've got in common with non-living things is we both have transitive actions. But what's special to living is immanent action. That's what's special to the living. Everything we do, whether it's willings, thinkings, seeing, understanding, feeding ourselves, growing ourselves, everything we do is done by us. We're going to examine each one of those actions and see what's special about it. Excuse me. I have to have an implant every 3 months and it produces hot flushes. If you see me suddenly perspiring, going red in the face, that's why. That's a brute. So this mode of operation of living things is immanent action. So we speak about the terms. There are two terms of this action. The word term, we've got it in English, terminus. It's a very strange thing, by the way, I find, the language is, because when you come into a country, you're very conscious of the differences in language. Americans tend to use adjectives, where other people tend to use nouns. In Australia, we'd say, where's the bus terminus? Here you'll say, where's the bus terminal? Things like that. I've noticed quite a lot of that. As for prepositions, forget it. I don't think Americans know what a preposition is. Forgive me. However, except one. Off of. They said just off of. But they use two prepositions instead of one. Anyway, they're all good fun, those things. So there are a lot of other things. So what does it mean to be living? This is what it means. Living things move themselves in some mode of movement. Any mode of movement, that's a living thing. Growth, nutrition, seeing, understanding, loving, passion, willing, etc. So to live is to perfect oneself. It's called auto-perfection, if you like. The irritability of a mimosa plant is a good example, as I mentioned before. Its irritability means from some action you get a specific response. So the mimosa, you touch it, and wherever you touch it, it'll react. Places like Jamaica, I haven't been there, but students have told me they have them growing everywhere, mimosa plants. The botany department at Niagara University gave me one, but it died long ago. It got too irritated by me. Now note this, healing is an imminent action. Who does the healing? Does the doctor heal the patient? No, all he does is remove the impediments so the patient can heal themselves. That's what the doctor does. That allows the patient to heal themselves by removing any impediments. With antibiotics, killing off, say, infection. We used to say when I was in pharmacy, there are 4 kinds of treatment for skin problems. And remember, skin's the biggest organ in the body and was the most sensitive and most difficult to treat sometimes. Physicians would run a mile rather than treat a skin problem sometimes. We'd say there was, I think it was sulfur, there was another one, I just can't recall which ones there were now. 3 of them were good. The 4th one, the devil himself can't cure, they used to say. But healing, we heal ourselves, and the physician removes the impediments. Teaching, the student teaches themselves, and the teacher removes the impediments. He displays images this way, that way, so the student could grasp it better. Who is the educator? The student. Who's the educated? The student. Not the teacher. He's the least important person in the class in many ways. All he's doing is, Dr. Kinsella, a very famous physician, used to say, you might present something 9 different ways in philosophy. He was a very celebrated surgeon, brain surgeon. In fact, the most modern knowledge of brain surgery is due to him. Nobel Prize was given to somebody else who stole his work, by the way. Well, I had the privilege of teaching him for a while, then later teaching alongside of him. And I've lost my point there.
The teachers themselves.
Yeah, the teachers themselves. And the 10th way is the one way the student sees it. So when a teacher presents something different ways sometimes, you might catch the first way, you the second way, you the third way, or something like that. But it's you who do the action, and you who benefits from the action. The teacher removes the impediments. I remember somebody saying, I was teaching nurses, and I think I had 125 nurses teaching in spread over 2 classes in the University of Ottawa. And I remember them saying they couldn't grasp the notion of a universal. We'll come to that later. You're talking about universal tree, universal man. Now, if you said universal bedpan, we'd understand what you mean. So removing impediments, you see. Everybody has their own way of seeing things. So healing and education are imminent actions. A car doesn't move itself. Its principle of movement is the engine, but it is a complex of transitive activity. And of course, what happens? It'll run down to 0 eventually. No gas, no battery. Now note some of the properties. The next thing, B3, the properties of vital activity. The action is towards entropy. That is to say, just a minute, what have I put there?
Entropy.
Yeah. Should be there. Yes, I think I'm comparing it. I might alter that just a little bit. The action is towards tension among living things. Ektropy. Ek means outside in Greek, the same as ex in Latin. Tropein means to seek. Ektropy. Entropy means to seek a middle. Ektropy means to seek an outside. This seeks an outside. This seeks entropy. Equilibrium, if you like. It runs down to equilibrium. If you had water, for instance, of 80 degrees and another lot of water 40 degrees and mix them, they'll come to a middle. They'll come to 60 degrees. You know that. You know, every 3 months when you have a shower, you want to remember that. So But that's entropy. That's running down to zero, as it were. You know, a watch spring will run down to zero, etc. But that's not the way it is with living things. They get dragged to the outside, as it were.
What modern scientists just refer to it as negative entropy.
Negative entropy, yeah. But the horse, I remember I lectured to some biologists on one occasion in the University of Ottawa. That's a very unusual way of putting things. None of this ever occurred to them. They're biologists dealing with living substance all the time. I never heard of it. So what happens here, it doesn't run down to zero, it stays on the outside. Horse remains horse and drags the hay to itself. Now, on the other hand, water plus heat, you get hot water. Spoon plus heat, you got a hot spoon. And whatever temperature the spoon is, which is the measure of the heat, it'll go halfway with the other, with the hot coffee. Go to equilibrium. So, also, living things don't form thirds. What do you get as a result of this action? Not spoon, not hot, but a third, hot spoon. There's always a composite. What about the horse? You don't get hay-fied horse or horseified hay. No, there's no thirds formed. If there were, and somebody tried to use something like this many years ago in a court in the United States, I remember reading about that in Australia. Somebody went before a judge and said, Your Honour, I'm not the man I was 7 years ago. You can't try me now. I was a different fellow. He's changed. He's a new man. It didn't come off. The judge knew a little more philosophy than he did. But so the living, if the non-living could stay in tension, then the spoon might be able to stay very hot in freezing water, or very cold in boiling hot water. That's what would happen if the non-living could stay in tension. It's called tension. What does that mean? It means it has an inclination to run down, but it resists the inclination. In other words, it keeps itself apart from running down to zero. So equilibrium, like clock spring, rain falling, hot spoon and coffee, pendulum, they're all running down to equilibrium. You know that. With everyday things we do. But with living things, there are no thirds form. One man said there were. His name was Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher. No wonder Nietzsche said the Germans never did ever show any or teach any original philosophy. Very precise people, very wonderful engineers, but bloody awful philosophers. Nietzsche, at least Kant, thought that when the tree comes into my mind tampers with it. The tree and my mind form a third. So I don't know anything about the tree really. All I know is that third. And it was Descartes that led him into that. Descartes led a lot of people into error, as we will see later why. But he said that third is what we know. He was wrong. He didn't understand. He never saw the great philosophers before him. The enormous writings of Aquinas, Thomas Aquinas, the enormous writings of Aristotle. I've got a book of Aristotle's basic writings, about that thick. Dr. Bonnet has one too, of course, they're available, about that thick. St. Thomas, I've got 2 shelves, that's only about, that's just got most of them. I've got nearly all his writings there, because they're very condensed in Latin, of course, mostly, but you can get them in English too, but they never read these things. From about the 17th to 18th century onwards, it was incest, if you like. The English philosophers all commenting on each other and little else. And the same with some of the Germans and the French. The Spanish and the Italians have left a marvellous, and the French, the Latin races, have left marvellous records of philosophical works. Marvellous. So, the definition of tension is diverse qualities with a consequent inclination. That's set out for you in your notes. So the example of a living substance and entropy. Here's an example. Supposing we put a brain, a couple of muscles, kidneys on the desk here. And we left them there, several organs, pancreas, liver. How many of you want to come to the classroom next week? Not too many. But that's funny. Look, they're all in front of me now. And I walk in the classroom. I'm not afraid to walk in the classroom. In other words, they remain in tension in us. They remain separate. They keep their own entity operating. But when the life is taken away, the life principle, we'll deal with that later, then bingo. They all run down to zero. I was at a pharmacist meeting one night, Catholic pharmacist meeting, and in Australia, and a young couple. We were up at about, I think, the 6th floor. They had a reception room there, and coming downstairs, a young couple I knew. I said, "What are you two doing here?" They said, "Look, under this it was sort of a closed door, a very thin panelled door. There was a stream of substance coming out, a very thin red liquid. And so somebody's broken a bottle of Nightingale floor polish in there." And somebody else said, "I'm not so sure." I said, "Well, look, I've got to catch a train." There were train rationing at the time. This is many, many years ago. There was sudden strikes or something, and the suburban railway system was difficult to catch, one every hour or something. And anyway, I rang to make sure to see if everything was all right next day, and the caretaker of this multi-storey building told me they found a mangled body there. It disappeared about a week before that. I think we met on Thursday night. It was on Saturday night. He was a famous reporter, newspaper reporter, and he suddenly disappeared from the reception. He'd gone into, apparently, where the fire stairway like we've got here, and he fell 7 stories. And this was the decomposition products. There was no odour to it, but it was a very weak, thin red colour. So that's what happens when the life goes out of us. We know that. That poor little girl, Lebowski, I think was her name, wasn't it? Magdalena, who got drowned here. A dear little girl. It broke my heart. I was up above on the cliffs showing friends the gorge. I didn't see it. And Father Francis de Rosa, your uncle, was down there. He didn't see it either. But, when finally after 3 weeks they found the body, they wouldn't allow the parents to see it. Wisely so. However, a dear little girl. So, these living things stay in tension. When the organs are separated from us, they lose their vital power. Then they go to entropy, giving off gases and running towards neutrality. What is death? This is an appropriate place to mention that. What is death? It's the loss of our ability to perform imminent actions. And we'll see what specifically causes that later. I could tell you now, but it'd be a little out of place to tell you that now. The loss of the ability to perform imminent actions. Not brain death. That's complete rubbish. Physicians are strongly acting against that now. Somebody told me, Dr. Mazziello told me, that it was brought in by Harvard University so they could take hearts out of people. It's brain death. That's no certain sign of death. We'll see what the certain sign of death is. Although we've already seen it. Putrefaction. It's the only certain sign of death, when the body goes bad. Remember in the Bible, he stinketh, Lord, he stinketh. So that's a sure sign of death, the only one. If there's another sign of death, that's being claimed, lots of them being claimed, like the woman who was a nurse that one of our colleagues dropped dead the last night of semester in the classroom, Dr. Hirsch. And I said, this woman spoke to me about death at the time. She works for some place in Niagara Falls that takes tissues from cadavers and sells them to hospitals. I said, how do you know when they're dead? Oh, we know. Well, yeah, okay, good. How? Well, the doctors know. They know. How do they know? But when I've lectured at medical conferences and things like that, the doctors don't know. They say they're only guessing. If the patient is dead, they don't want the tissues. If the patient is not dead, they might be killing them, depending what they're doing, what they're taking, etc., etc. So, we've seen that sort of thing. Lesser forms take over, lesser function take over when the patient's dead, of course, the various things. Now, the signs of that mode of operation, in other words, imminent action. 1, irritability is the fundamental activity of living substances. It's fundamental property in the whole organism. That is to say, a specific response to some stimulus. That, like the mimosa, the skin, certain kinds of things like physiotherapy, they're doing certain things, they'll sort of stimulate the skin by doing this. And I have good reason to think that when I was in Singapore, I discussed this with some people there in Southeast Asia, where they're doing the acupuncture. A lot of that's based upon, as far as I can see. I may be corrected there, but I don't think I'm wrong. Irritability. The action of the mimosa plant. Now they're finding that plants have specific responses. They're finding now if you chop a plant or cut a plant, the latest thing they're experimenting with is this, and this has only come out the last few days, as a matter of fact, a bit of information on this. The plant puts out a aspirin-like substance. Well, I discovered what that is, methyl salicylate, which is used, by the way, for rubbing on skin for ointments and things like that, various ointments for pain, etc. Aspirin is acetyl salicylic acid, and this is just methyl salicylate. So, but the plant gives this off, and they've tested 3 or 4 feet above the plant, and they could find methyl salicylate. The plant is giving this off as a part of its specific response to a stimulus of some kind. And they're talking now, they might be going just a little far, that plants are communicating by putting this stuff off. They're going just a little far for that. They're misunderstanding. As the plant, the first thing the plant wants to do is protect itself, not communicate with others. So, with cows, they've claimed that milk is given off better by cows when there's music there. That could be explained by simple irritability of some kind, some stimulus, something being stimulated, who knows? We can't be certain of those things, very difficult, and it's not that important for that matter. So, there are 2 reactions in plants too, one called heliotropism. Helios in Greek means sun. So, heliotropism, sun-seeking, that's what it means, sun-seeking. Helios, sun, tropane, to seek. Then there's another thing with plants, now that's the leaves, etc. will seek that. Then there's a geotropism. Now the roots will seek the earth. Geos in Greek meaning earth. And it's earth-seeking and sun-seeking. That's the distinction. They're reactions of irritability. My dad had a drum. We call it a 44-gallon drum, oil drum. You'd call it a 55-gallon. See, our gallon's better than yours. Exaggerate. But this was down the backyard, this big drum. And I don't know how this seed got in there, what got in there, or what it was originally. I only saw it when it had been developed. And here is a shoot going down here to the earth. Here's another shoot going up here to the sun. Heliotropism, geotropism. Another thing that was in my dad's backyard. He had this drum down the back for some reason or other. I've forgotten now why he had it there, but it doesn't matter. Here's another thing I witnessed in the Baragarang Valley. What was he? Slovakian, Czech, I think he was, farmer. No, he's Hungarian, I think. Hungarian farmer. Asked me to come with him. We went out hunting one day. I remember he was intrigued by a funny little animal he saw on a rock. He could never get close enough to it. It was always shy. He said, it's about that big. He said, it's got 4 legs. I knew what he was talking about, a platypus. Shows you how mixed up Australians can get. It's got feet like a duck, webbed feet like a duck. It has fur like a dog. It has poison spurs at the back of the two back legs. It lays its egg like a bird. And it burrows like a water rat and makes a nest like a bird in the burrow. Talk about mixed up. I don't know whether I've got any of that in my family, but that platypus, while we were going to see where we were sneaking up to try and see them, I've seen them swimming, there's plenty of them, but they're not easy, they're very shy animals. He took me to see a rock. This rock was split. He said that a bird perhaps had dropped a little tiny seed. And here's the rock, and I remember the rock was about 6 feet tall, something like that, and here's a tree growing out of it. And all the root system was spread all over one side, like this. So what had happened, it's quite easy to work out what happened. A seed was dropped there, it sent out a little hair root to get some water. And it was in sandstone rock, which has little interstices between the various sand particles. And sending down this, gradually built up the root hairs, sent out more root hairs, and gradually built it up to split this massive rock. This sandstone rock is very hard, very tough stuff, as far as I'm aware. So that's all reactions of irritability. Before we take a break, I want to tell you about what happened to a friend of mine in Africa. He was a missionary there. Out in the jungle one day, he came face to face with the biggest lion he'd ever seen. It was enormous, this lion. And he looked at it and he said, I'm finished. It's the end of my life. He knelt down and he's praying away there, and he's saying, that's funny. Looked up. There's the lion kneeling down, joined hands, paws joined, and praying. He said, thank you, Lord, you've saved me, you've converted this lion, thank you. The lion says, can't you shut up? You can see I'm saying grace before meals. Please take a break, 10-minute break, and we'll have some coffee.